houses. It took several hours to partially unload the Christina of the cargo designated for Zanzibar and replenish her hold. Then Will and most of his shipmates were at liberty. This would be only a brief stopover. The ship would sail on the first tide next morning, not long after dawn. But until midnight, they were free to enjoy the sights and sounds of Zanzibar, to explore its bazaars, drink their fill in its quayside bars, and sample the delights of its spicy cuisine. The ground on the dockside underfoot was hot as a gridiron. Prostitutes were evident everywhere, calling out to the men as they swaggered by, knowing the sailors could have been weeks at sea without the comfort and pleasure of a woman's body. Some men succumbed, peeling away from the group, happily led by the hand by smiling, white-toothed women with skin like burnished ebony. Will never gave them a second glance. A seasoned sailor after 10 years at sea, he knew the best-looking women didn't need to go near the quay, didn't need to hunt their own game, because it came to them. With his crewmate and friend, Paolo Tornabene, Will headed straight to a tall, narrow building in the heart of Stone Town. It was a bar, not a drinking dive, a meeting place, not a brothel. Tonight it was doing a brisk trade when the two men arrived. Efficiently run by a Lebanese woman, it was always packed, known to serve the best food this side of the Indian Ocean. Men were being turned away at the door, but there was always a place for Will here at Rafka's. The owner, Rafka Pappas, was a widow. She had moved to Zanzibar as a newlywed nearly 20 years ago from Beirut with a husband who died soon after they arrived, leaving her childless and penniless with only a run-down, ramshackle building. Rafka had transformed it into this thriving bar, restaurant and guest house. These were the only facts known about her. Yet, if Will were to be honest with himself, he also knew she was more than a little in love with him, but he chose not to let himself think about that. Rafka's place was always buzzing, the food and drink accompanied by live jazz music, the singers hand-picked by Rafka as much for the beauty of their faces as the melody of their voices. Tonight, there was a mixed crowd at the tables, mostly men, crews from other ships, merchants and traders, British and German settlers in Zanzibar to do business, assorted consular officials of varying nationalities, the odd policeman, and, this evening, a table of 4 Germans, 2 of them in naval uniform and sporting the sinister-looking swastika. Someone had once hinted to Will that Rafka was a spy, possibly for more than one country. Will didn't know if there was any truth in the rumour, and to be honest, he didn't care. A place like Zanzibar was probably full of spies, and no one would be better placed to fill that function than Rafka Pappas, whose establishment was patronised by men of all nations and stations. Everyone who was anyone went to Rafka's. Will walked into the bar with Paolo, navigating their way through the crush to the only vacant table. All he wanted was to drink. He'd probably eat some food, not out of hunger, but because Paolo would insist upon it. The young Italian had evidently appointed himself Will's protector and conscience. All Will wanted, all he ever wanted, was to find oblivion, to drink as much as he could, then pass out, preferably in the arms of a woman, and tonight that woman would probably be Rafka. She saw him as soon as he came in and threw him a wide grin, but carried on with whatever she was doing behind the bar. Will liked that about her. She never demanded anything, never allowed herself to appear needy, didn't pepper him with questions. Instead, she just accepted what he offered when it was offered. He had no illusions that she lived like a nun between his visits, but whenever he was on the island, she was there for him. As Zanzibar was a regular call for the Christina, he had seen a lot of her. Right now, though, he wanted to get drunk, to feel the bitter tang of the spirit in the back of his throat, the burning warmth as it spread through his veins, the feeling of numbness that soaked through his whole body as the liquor hit his bloodstream and deadened the pain. Oblivion. That was what he craved. To wipe out the thoughts that crowded his head when on dry land, clouded his judgment and screamed at him constantly that he was a failure and, at barely 30, had squandered his life away. Once they had eaten, Paolo left to return to the ship, after reminding Will to be back on board by midnight. "I tell you again, my friend, don't be late. Il Capitano has said 100 times that next time anyone late, they off his ship."